G'day, I'm Sean and welcome to the CarExpert Podcast. We're back again for another week. We've got Scott here. How are you, mate?
I'm good. I'm a little bit concerned about what's going on to my left, though.
I know. I mean, he's stepped straight off a 777 from Abu Dhabi, fresh off the Patrol launch. Paul Maric is here. How are you, mate?
Good. I was going to think of an Arabic term, but I don't know any. I can't remember them.
Nissan Patrol, by the sound of it.
Yes,
because,
that's a good one.
If you didn't see the launch, it was all Patrol on all extent, sand dunes.
I'm going to put a little overlay here of the car park at the launch event. I'm not even kidding you, 50% of the cars there, and there were 800 attendees, were Patrols. So you walk out into the car park, just Patrol, 62, 61, older stuff, like they absolutely love their Patrols in the Middle East.
It is funny, isn't it? Because it's Land Cruiser is big here, but not there, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, they don't mind the Land Cruiser, but the Patrol is well and truly king in the Middle East. Like, it is happening.
How do you reckon the valet went when the owners walked out and said, I'm just after a silver Patrol?
Yeah. Which one's yours? The white one over there.
Just 8 sets of Patrol headlights flashing as you flip the key.
Yeah, all right. Well, we are going to talk about Patrol. We're going to talk about VFACTS. But before we do any of that, we're going to dive into the top stories on the CarExpert.com.au website. In a classic case of the government attempting to utilise technology but it backfiring on them, a website dedicated to showing how efficient an EV is has leaked the pricing of the upcoming BYD Shark Ute. Listed as a Z Utility BYD Shark Base 4x4, the site showed a recommended retail price of $68,000, putting the 320 kilowatt plug-in hybrid ute about on par with the mid-spec V6 Ford Ranger. BYD have previously hinted that the Shark will be competitively priced in Australia. However, what spec the $68,000 refers to is yet to be determined. Pricing is set to be announced in October. Queensland has become the latest state to axe EV rebates. As of September 3rd, the Sunshine State motorists have to fork out an extra $6,000 for the right to drive a battery-powered vehicle. The scheme was initially launched in 2022 and expected to cost the taxpayer $45 million. Originally, it offered a $3,000 rebate for anyone who purchased a battery electric vehicle with a list price below $58,000. In 2023, it was increased to $6,000 for a vehicle below $68,000. The Queensland government claims that more than 10,000 residents have taken up the offer, and the scheme is being wound up more than 9 months earlier than originally planned. Despite being the fourth state to end the rebate, Queensland is the first jurisdiction to actually utilise all the funds before the rebate ended. If you thought Tesla's naming structure was crass, the Elon Musk-led company has rolled out a new automation feature on their vehicles called Actually Smart Summon, or ARS for short. Tesla also launched Dumb Summon as part of a recent software update. The ASS feature allows owners to use their smartphone app to ask their car to either come to me or go to Target, whilst the Dumb Summon is more of an in and out car park feature that only works backwards and forwards. Whilst the idea is great, in reality, Tesla's switch from sensors to camera systems for its autonomous driving and parking functions hasn't been the smoothest, with many owners reporting the system isn't as good as the long-used radar parking systems. For those wondering, if you exclude the Cybertruck, Tesla models are S, 3, X and Y. Put them together with Actually Smart Summon and you might find yourself in the mind of a 14-year-old or the owner of a giant social media company. All right, Paul, you are here only for a short time because I know you have to run off, but we're going to talk about Patrol. So look, if you haven't seen our Paul's walk-around video, it is live on the YouTube channel. Do check that out. There's a written story on CarExpert.com.au as well. But Paul, give us the headlines. What is, well, a lot's new, but what is the headline features of the new Patrol?
Look, this was a big deal for them, and I've got to put it into context. Middle East has had Patrols since the late 1950s. Like the earliest generations of Patrol, and it is huge over there to the point where they basically said if we're going to launch a brand new Patrol, it has to be in the Middle East. Then it came to which part of the Middle East are we going to launch it in, and Abu Dhabi somehow came down as the place to launch it. And I thought it was quite fascinating. Before I get into the details here, this car was under so much secrecy that it wasn't up until the day of the event that there was a leak on what this vehicle looked like. Typically, there will be leaks right up until the car's launched. And the only reason there was a leak was they delivered the car to one of the sheiks to have a look at. And because it was part of traditional requirements to have the car launched in Abu Dhabi. And some of the sheiks people were basically taking photos of it as it sort of was driven around the place. But they basically, at all times, had these cars completely covered up to the point where you didn't even know what was under the covers. So it was a big deal. The event was amazing as well. They actually had in this exhibition centre, they built a sand dune like an actual sand dune,
Like out of sand?
indoors. Like it was unbelievable.
Where did they find all the sand?
I think they got it from Australia.
Yeah,
They
okay.
imported it, so.
Like they do with the camels, yeah.
And they actually do. Fun fact: ship Australian sand to Waikiki Beach.
Well, there you go.
So anyway,
Which is in the Middle East?
no.
It's in the middle of the Pacific.
That's
I think.
right, just in the east. But yeah, so big event for them, and it showed. Like this was all the big wigs of the Middle East came to have a look at this, prospective customers, and this is going to be an interesting car because it takes a deviation from existing Y62 and completely transforms the game when it comes to power and torque from the engine, technology, styling, etc. So I'll run you through some of the high-level stuff. On the outside, in terms of the design, slightly bigger, so 35mm longer, 35mm wider as well. Changed the front end with the LED designs. They've gone with the dual C on the front, and some people say that it looks like a 3 for Y63.
Except for the other side, which
Yeah,
is like an
it's an
E
E.
for
It's like
Yes,
headlights.
east, Middle East.
Middle East. There we go.
Very good. They've got a couple of Easter eggs as well. So puddle lamps have since 1951, which is when the car was originally launched. Outside as well, other changes, you're going to see 170-degree camera on the front, so 360 camera, but with ultra-wide angles. So it means that if you are approaching an intersection, you're getting better visibility around it, because they were saying that now that women are allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia, that to make them feel more comfortable with such a big vehicle, they basically need the ability to be able to see around the car, and this was part of the reason they went to town with these cameras and sensors and all that sort of stuff. Front and rear cross traffic alert on the outside as well. Beneath the skin, changes to the suspension, so it's now air suspension all round, so it's no longer that hydraulic system they used to run in the previous gen Patrol. It'll go up to 70mm higher for off-road setting, and then when it's parked it can lower to let you in and out easier. Inside the cabin though, this is some absolutely full-on stuff. So you've got over 28 inches of screen. So it is this enormous screen that runs along the top of the dashboard. It basically now runs Nissan's second generation of their infotainment system, so a whole suite of Google features, so Google Assistant, Google Maps, through both the centre screen, the driver display, and then head-up display as well. Biometric climate controls, so what it's able to do...
I have questions about this.
Yeah, so it basically uses infrared sensors on each seating position to measure your skin temperature. So if you get into the car where it's, it was 40-something degrees outside, if you hop into the car, instead of making everyone else colder so that you can feel more comfortable, which is what happens to my wife. She goes, just like 16 degrees. I'm like, okay, but I'm freezing now. And then you do the dual zone thing and it just doesn't work. But what this is able to do is basically detect your skin temperature. If it sees that you are hotter or colder, just for your sector of the car, it can adjust the cooling speed, the intensity. Not the actual temperature.
Are those sensors built into the seats, or are they in the roof reading camera-based down on the passengers?
So I don't know.
Okay.
I couldn't see the sensors anywhere. I don't think they'd be in the seats because they had to read skin. So they must have an ability to do a wide-angle thing that's then split into sectors.
Flare camera or something like that, yeah.
Massage seats, but they've gone with pneumatic motors, so that basically it will punch a hole in your back. So
That's because they're being punched by a gorilla, right?
but in some of the cars, you turn your massage seats on, and it's like
being tickled from the back seat.
someone lightly pushing my seat. Whereas this will really go to town on you. The cabin was won by the Californian design team. So basically the way that it works is Nissan has design studios around the world, and they all bid for interior and exterior design. And it was the Americans that won the inside, and you can kind of tell it's all big screens, lots of nice materials.
A lot of red in one of the cars,
A lot of red. So look, from an interior perspective, they've done a good job there. But under the bonnet is the biggest change. So gone is the V8, now 3.5 litre twin turbocharged petrol V6, 9-speed automatic transmission. It's a Jatco transmission. They've had issues with those in the past. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. There is also a naturally aspirated version, which hopefully we won't be getting because
oh God, well, I remember the last time they did that sort of thing with the Y61, it was horrible on fuel.
Yeah, I think this, I don't know where they're going to be selling that, but that's an engine that I don't want to be near. But the car is now heavier as well. GVM hasn't changed, so it's still 3,500 kilos. We'll have a 3,500 kilo brake towing capacity. GVM remains unchanged, which means you can have less payload inside.
So Nissan has also said the wheelbase is the same, even though the length of the body is long. Is this a really heavy redevelopment of the last platform, or are they pitching it in as a new car?
No, it's a new platform, and I think what they showed a cutaway of the platform, and you can kind of tell it's got room for batteries and stuff in the future. So whether it's a hybridised or an E-Force style system, I don't know, but you can see the platform is bigger for the purpose of that. 317 kilowatts, 700 newton meters, so it's got
that's
a bit of mumbo.
More than the Land Cruiser by a fair margin, isn't it?
Yep, but it is quiet. Like when they were wheeling that car in, when it was in its full dress, basically you couldn't hear the thing at all. So it didn't have that V8 burble that the current one has. Full-time four-wheel drive system, rear diff lock. Pricing, they've said, if I convert this to Australian dollars, between 96,000 to 150. So we're all getting them from the same factory, basically. So the interesting part, though, we're going to be the first market to get right-hand drive production. Excellent. But it won't be until the end of 2026.
This is what Scott and I both wanted to talk to you about, because the current car is 14 years old. It is going to be 16 years old. It's going to be legally able to drive.
It'll be competing with the XC90.
It will be, exactly.
Like, I mean, let's be honest, no one's going to get one until probably mid-2027. Yep. So that's a long time for that current one. But why launch a car now that is not going to be here for 3 years?
It's simple. They have so much demand for Armada and Patrol that they need to satisfy left-hand drive first. And when right-hand drive kicks off, we're at the very front of the line, but it'll just be getting the cars. So they'll basically run a dual production line there where they'll still produce a Y62 with a V8 and the new interior that we have effectively just for us. Because South Africa, for some bizarre reason, I was talking to one of the South African journos and he was saying that they barely sell any. It's something like a 1-to-10 ratio between Patrol and Land Cruiser.
Interesting.
And over in South Africa, the Land Cruiser is cheaper than the Patrol, which is quite odd.
Do they get a different version of the Land Cruiser? Because I know we get the full-on turbo diesel setup. Do they get a lower power petrol, or is it the same?
Not sure, but they barely sell any Patrol. So in terms of right-hand drive markets, it'll be New Zealand, us, Japan, even though they don't sell many there. So you can see why right-hand drive isn't exactly the biggest priority for them. But look, I'm excited to drive it. I think that this is a huge step forward for them, and it looks premium. Like seeing it in person, the Pro 4X version looks unreal as well. It's got all terrains on it, but the luxury version, they do a city and an off-road bumper for the Middle East, depending on which spec you go for. They're doing a Nismo version as well. Nismo will probably just be a body kit like the last one. But I think that engine is going to really differentiate this, the styling, the features, the technology. I mean, this makes a Land Cruiser feel old, and that's not good news for Toyota.
Yes, and I'm sure that will upset a lot of Toyota enthusiasts that listen to the podcast and watch it. But I mean, look, it's going to come out. It's going to be priced, clearly going to be priced alongside Land Cruiser. But it's going to kick it to the guts. What I'm curious is, currently, if you buy a Y62, there's a ton of people out there that can modify it, give you more power, give you a lift. Do you think that's going to come quite quickly, or is Nissan going to do the Ford and lock it all out?
No, look, they've been quite smart. So this engine, I think it's the VR35, it's been around for a while. They're using a similar engine in the Z. They've made modifications to this. So they actually took some interesting oil technology from the GTR for the turbos. Basically, with the GTR, because it was a track vehicle, they needed to have the ability to circulate oil under extreme G-forces. They found that when they were testing this engine without that oil technology, when they were on the sand dunes on angles for extended periods, they weren't able to scavenge oil for the turbochargers to be cooled. So they basically implemented effectively like a dry sump system for the turbochargers so that you can actually cool the turbochargers while you're on angles. And they were saying it was something like 46-degree angle it will maintain before it starts having issues with circulation of coolants.
I think you'd be more worried about going over at that point, 46 degrees.
That's what I would have thought. So, similar to the temperature outside as well.
Yes.
So, they've really thought about everything. And I think knowing Nissan and knowing how important this vehicle is, they've done a lot of testing in the Middle East. They're currently testing in Australia. There's a lot of work that's gone into this vehicle. And actually, the other interesting point as well, I know I'm rabbiting on now, but they've retained hydraulic steering too. So they haven't gone to the EPAS system. They've copied what Toyota's done for the Land Cruiser. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes, because that means it prevents some of your ADAS systems from being as effective as they could be.
So it means with your lane keeping, if you drift to the edge of your lane, it can't actively turn the wheel back. It has to grab a brake?
Yeah, it does a combination of them. Right. So Toyota does it with the Land Cruiser. It can have some steering input, but it's nowhere near as easily done as an EPAS system. Yeah.
So we've been hearing for a long time from Europe in particular that electric is the future, that brands are going to stop investing in internal combustion. We've had brands like Audi come out and say, we've released our last new petrol engine. It's really interesting to me that this engine, for example, is a development of what's been in an Infiniti and Nissan stuff for a long time. Toyota's obviously got a new range of engines in the Land Cruiser that'll run well through 2030, we think. It does seem like maybe the end of internal combustion was called a bit too soon, because brands keep finding ways to bring more power, more torque and better efficiency.
You know, it's this really weird thing. What they do is they talk to their customers and their customers tell them, hey, I don't want an electric SUV. I mean, it's as simple as that. These guys, we literally asked them that and they said our customers didn't want it. Yeah. So why would we build it?
There's not a heap of charging stations in the middle of the desert, is there?
So, when you
that's what they dig out of the ground in the Middle East, electricity.
They literally, it's so simple when you think about it. If your customer does not want it, why would you build an electric thing and then no one buys it? Like, it's happening around the world. You said that they called it too early. It's like you're making decisions on behalf of people. The other thing that I found really fascinating, I read a news story the other day, and this is kind of tangential, about Norway now having a record portion of EV sales. It was something like 97% of sales last month were EVs. Well, Norway puts in $4 billion of government subsidies each year to push EVs. It's so expensive to buy an internal combustion car, which is why people don't buy them. They're not buying it because out of the goodness of their hearts they want an EV. It's just too expensive to buy an internal combustion cars. And they sell something like 10,000 cars a month. Their car market is tiny.
Well, there's only like 4 million people in Norway, 5 million people in Norway.
So when people use this Norway example, it's like, guys, that is not the rest of the world. It's not Australia. It's not the Middle East. So don't try and push this stuff onto people when clearly it's not a viable solution. If it's a city car, you're driving around the city, whatever, that's fine. But if you're towing, you're doing off-road driving, an EV is a joke for that stuff. So,
and Nissan already make an EV. You can buy a Nissan Leaf if you want an electric Nissan.
Well, in Australia you can't anymore, and you can't yet. It's interesting you mentioned space for batteries and stuff, because that does seem like the logical next step for these cars is hybrid assistance. Do you think by 2027, when this thing actually arrives in Australia, we might get a hybrid version, or do you think it's going to be what we see now?
I think it's there as a just in case. Okay. If they need to do a hybrid version, it will be a very mild hybrid. You're not going to go sticking batteries in, because the problem that you got is, they didn't quote the weight, but the current one is something like 2,400-ish kilos curb weight. This has 100-litre fuel tank. If you've got the same GVM at 3,500 kilos. And a battery, you're eating into your payload, which means eventually you're going to eat into your towing capacity, because you'll limit the amount of downball weight you can have. Yep. So I don't think they're going to go and throw away all that stuff. Although, if you have a look at the Patrol Warrior, that has an upgraded GVM, so they can accommodate the extra components that they have. So there is a chance that they will make some changes there. They also called out, unprompted, the work that Premcar's doing. So to me, it seems like they could be a shoe-in for a next generation Warrior. Because that's not sold anywhere else. And it seems to make sense to me that if you're going to do those mods, they should be done and offered elsewhere. Because trust me, in the Middle East, a Warrior would be off the chops.
Mate, there'll be GTR versions of the Patrol in no time in the Middle East, I'm sure.
Yep.
Well, Nissan spent a lot of time in Australia talking about how much work it had to do with Premcar and with head office to get that project approved. Yep. So for Nissan at home and at head office to say, yes, we're okay with you doing that to the Navara and selling it through our dealers, we know it's good stuff. They'd be mad not to throw some money from either Japan or the Middle East at it and get that thing going broadly.
Yep, 100%. So, yeah, I'm excited to drive. I know that it's going to be a long time away, but I think we will be doing the launch of the car as well, where we'll actually drive left-hand drive examples, but I'm going to be very much excited for that.
And a few years older, probably. But yes.
A few more grey hairs.
Yes.
Something to look forward to. Well, make sure you're subscribed and hang around for the next 18 months for when Paul does drive the new Patrol. Paul, thanks so much for taking some time out, mate. I really appreciate it.
No worries.
Yeah, we cannot wait for this Patrol. So I think it's going to be very cool. But yeah, thanks for coming along. All right, we are back thanks to the magic of editing. Paul has left and now it's just Scott and I. And we're going to dive into VFACTS.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's just get the monkey off the back. 100,786 deliveries. Last month was 102,000 deliveries, which maybe means that your prediction was correct. The market will go down.
I've been saying this all year, and I'm not taking this as a sign I was right, because I'm not. Year to date, the market has been really strong, but compared to August 2023, which was the biggest ever August on the VFACTS sales charts, August 2024, which is the month just gone, was down about 9%. That's a significant drop. It was actually still the second biggest ever August, but it does point to I suppose, a bit of a broader trend that we've been expecting to arrive and finally might be here.
Now, before we dive in too far, I do want to point out one thing that we still call this segment VFACTS, but the numbers are actually a combination of two separate sources now, aren't they?
Yeah, so earlier this year, with all of the talk around the impending emission standards for Australia, Tesla and Polestar pulled their numbers from the Federal Chamber of Automotive Industries, which is the peak body for car makers and puts together VFACTS, and instead now reports them through the Electric Vehicle Council of Australia. So the numbers we're talking about are for the full market. We've combined the two, but when we say VFACTS, we mean VFACTS numbers plus Tesla and Polestar, which come from somewhere else.
So if you look at the website, you read the story, you see that they're still listed in there, that's why. So we've cleared that up. All good, we can move on.
We're on.
All right, here we go. Toyota, unsurprisingly, still number one. They're down 3.7% year on year, which is interesting because the RAV4 sales are through the roof and it's still king this month.
I was with Toyota on Wednesday driving the new Camry, and that was when the numbers for VFACTS came out, and the feedback was, we think this is a beautiful set of numbers, which is a reference to, I think, Paul Keating, ex-Australian Prime Minister. It has had a rough trot with supply. We know with the RAV4. We also know that it's changed over from the pre-update Hilux to the new V-Active technology. I wouldn't be surprised if Toyota really launches in the second half of this year and into the end of the year. It's got waits down to about 4 months on RAV4. It's seeing huge demand for hybrid, even though it's killed the petrol-only models. It's also getting ready to roll out the new Prado.
Maybe sometime eventually, we hope.
Well, towards the end of the year is what we know. Toyota is in a really strong spot, as it just always seems to be. And with RAV4 supply and now new Camry coming online as well, yeah, I'd be staggered if that year-to-date drop doesn't become equal or ahead by the end of the year.
Yes, well, we haven't seen Camry up the top in a long time because they haven't had any cars to get up the top. The interesting thing is Ford is still number two, and number two on the model charts too, with Ranger delivering, let me find the number that I've lost here.
8,890 for Ford overall and 5,431 deliveries for Ranger for the month.
Yes, sorry, now I'm back on track and I found the right part of my page. Hilux down to 4,496, so it's actually, they're trailing a fair way behind Ranger now. Is that, I guess, is V-Active technology not as active as they hoped it would be? Is it just, do we know why the Hilux numbers seem to be down so much?
There's no sort of easy number to point at that says why Hilux is down. Year to date, again, there is the fact that Toyota changed over between the old and the new model, and that changeover period is usually a slow one for deliveries because once the old ones are gone and the new ones aren't here, you can't sell any cars. In terms of the month, these things are very supply dependent, and we know that Ford ordered itself a boat. It's got it for 2 years to take...
Fordy McFordface, I remember.
Fordy McFordface, exactly. The Mr. Blue Oval himself. Yes. To take Everests and Rangers from Thailand to Australia, because that's where they're built, and they're their two most important cars by the length of the straight. So it wouldn't surprise me if Toyota has a couple of stronger months on Hilux because the boats are arriving. Ford's supply is so consistent to those two cars, Ranger and Everest, that it's got a bit of an advantage there. I think the strength that Toyota has when we look at a Hilux number being down but Toyota's number being really strong is something that very few other brands have, and Ford certainly doesn't, and that's, even though Hilux might be down, the rest of its range is so strong. RAV is strong, Corolla is still strong in its segment, Kluger is still strong in its segment. You look at Yaris Cross, Corolla Cross, Yaris, all those cars bring incremental volume, but in Toyota terms, incremental is still really significant for other brands. Whereas Ford, 5,500 of 8,800 cars is a huge percentage of your cars to have coming from one model. It doesn't have the same strength across its business. And that means that if Ranger has a month like Hilux has, Ford has a bad month as well.
Very true. All right, now one thing, and I know you can't really talk about it yet because it's under embargo, but you were at the Mustang launch the other day.
I was.
Spoken about that. Yeah, and you can't talk about the Mustang.
Can't talk about how it drives, no.
You can talk about how the American one drives because you drove that quite some time ago.
Yeah, which is eerily similar to the Australian one, but just from the other side of the car.
Yes. But have they alluded to what sort of numbers they expect to see from the new Mustang?
They haven't, and that's also going to be determined by historical demand because Ford's been taking orders for the Mustang for a really long time. We actually, we had it down to arrive in Australia, I think 12 months ago originally, and it's been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. So it's not a massive seller in the context of the Australian sales charts, but for a long time it was the best-selling sports car in Australia, just the way VFACTS classifies it. I'd be very surprised if in the next couple of months as these cars start hitting dealers and customers who've been waiting for a long time, we see multiple hundreds per month, which is big in the sports car world. Whether that's reflective of how the car is going to go over its life cycle is probably not clear because they're now up to model year 25 and the first model year 24 cars are only hitting the road now.
And it's a fair lick more expensive than they were when they came out in 2016, which I think they were about 60 grand for a V8 in 2016. So that was on par with what a Commodore or a Falcon was at the time. So now you're looking at nearly 100. It's a lot more money to spend on.
It's a lot more money. I don't think anyone's going to care. And we'll obviously talk about this in more detail once the review is actually live on the 19th of September. But the people who are buying these cars aren't buying them because they're sensible, practical, economical choices. They're buying them because they love them and they've got some spare cash, and 90 grand, 70 grand, they're still going to buy the car.
So the Eco ones will buy the Eco Boost. That's the sensible choice if you do want to save some fuel in your new Mustang. Moving on, D-Max still number 4. I mean, good on D-Max. They are moving 2,500 cars. Like that's, considering they make 2 cars, that is great for them. And if they made as many cars as Toyota, do you think they'd be as successful as Toyota, or do you think it's just because they've got that corner of the market?
What's that quote from the British TV chef? If my grandma had wheels, she'd be a bike. I don't know that it's a particularly relevant comparison. And what Isuzu does really well is one platform, ladder frame, big diesel engine, towing and off-roading special. So I think if Ford had the same range as Toyota and the same dealer network and the same marketing team, maybe it'd be side by side with them. But I think we're probably playing a bridge too far there with Isuzu. What it does show is, as much as the next-gen Ranger is really incredible inside, as much as the new Hilux sort of shows off with its 48-volt tech and obviously that Toyota reputation, people are not necessarily swayed by that across the market. The D-Max isn't as flash inside as a Ranger. It's got a good reputation. It doesn't quite have the Hilux's reputation. But what it does do is offer the majority of that experience and for less money across the board. And given what's going on in the world with interest rates, with money being really tight, there is still a really strong place for a really reliable, serviceable and solid ute that doesn't quite hit the heights of the big 2, but does offer a huge percentage of that experience for a chunk less money.
So why, and maybe this is something that no one can answer, but how is it that they sell twice the amount of D-Maxes as opposed to the sister BT50? Is that just like the 86 and the BRZ used to be, there's so many of these made and only so many of these made, or what do you think that's?
Look, there's got to be something in the production numbers. Isuzu has the production line in Thailand that builds the BT50, so it would be really strange business for them to pump out more of the rival car, given they're the ones building it. I think as well, though, if you look at Isuzu, it has 2 cars in Australia, and it is known for the D-Max and the MUX. So if you are looking at the 2 of them, in my mind at least, there is a logic to, well, why would I not just go for the one that the brand specialises in rather than the BT50, which is still a good ute, but it's a Mazda version of the Isuzu. The other thing Mazda's got going is it's got a lot more focus on a lot more cars. It's not just advertising the BT50, it's pushing its new luxury stuff, and there's a lot of all-hybrid branding around at the moment on billboards. It's pushing run-out CX-30, it's got a massive range of vehicles, and that means its marketing spend is bigger, but it's split across those cars.
So we'll stick on Mazda for a second because they were the number 3 in terms of the outright sales or deliveries. Sorry, there's some people that have commented that we say sales.
Yeah, important distinction.
We mean deliveries.
Yep.
Kia and Hyundai rounding out the top 5. Everest rounding out top 5 in terms of the models. One thing that I did notice, hybrid and plug-in hybrid sales are through the roof, whereas internal combustion is down.
Yep.
What is going on there?
Look, there's more choice, and that's a really important thing in Australia. I don't think that there's been any question that Australians want more fuel-efficient choices, and that's not necessarily an environmental decision, it's a hip pocket decision. If you can save fuel over the 3, 5, 7 years you own the car, obviously you're going to take that option if it drives similarly and is priced similarly to the equivalent petrol, and we've kind of reached that point now. The RAV4's always been the poster boy, obviously, but across the Toyota range, save for the big, heavy off-road stuff, they're hybrid only. Hyundai Tucson hybrid has finally arrived in good volumes. Nissan e-Power tech is fantastic. Haval is pushing really hard on its hybrid tech as well. And then we're going to see a lot more hybrids from MG going forward as well. So I don't think it's down to anything beyond people have wanted them and they're now finally here. I think the plug-in hybrid thing's interesting, and I know we've gone back and forward on that tech quite a lot. There's a lot of talk around electric vehicles at the moment, and there has been all year. And I think there is a real, awareness in the market from people of what that tech can offer, but not everyone's ready to make the jump yet. And as much as I struggle with the concept because I still feel that in some cases it's the worst of both worlds, if you really want to go electric, you enjoy that driving experience, but you're not ready to make the leap, there is a broader range of plug-in hybrids arriving in Australia, and that seems to me to be a really logical stepping stone that more and more people are taking up.
Now, you wrote a story the other day on the back of your Camry launch that you went to about how RAV4 Prime, which is the plug-in hybrid version of the RAV4, might actually come to Australia. Now, we've driven that in the States. It is fantastic.
Yeah.
Do you think that plug-in hybrid sales would double if they bought that car? Probably not double, but there's definitely been an appetite for that car here, right?
Yeah, just to be clear, I don't know if it's the RAV4 Prime that will come. Toyota said that sooner rather than later it will have PHEVs in Australia, and that's a bit of a change from its previous attitude. It would certainly make a huge difference. I mean, given the popularity of the RAV4 hybrid, Toyota would only bring that car to Australia if it could actually secure decent supply. Because
and they're only built left-hand drive, aren't they?
At the moment, the US is a challenging market for Australia because a lot of cars for the US are built in the US, and demand is so strong already, there's no reason to build right-hand drive over there. They also have different rules around emissions and that sort of thing to Europe, Japan, the rest of the world. So if Toyota can start building a version of that car in right-hand drive, I think we get our RAV4 from Japan, then huge bump for the market. I think Toyota's also finally seen the writing on the wall with the NX450H Plus, which is the plug-in hybrid NX.
Is that with enhancement pack 1 or 2?
I think enhancement pack 1 is the sunroof, but it sounds so much fancier. That car's been off sale since October 2023 because demand is so high. And if you are in Toyota head office, they're obviously Lexus parent company. You'd be mad to see that demand for that car and not join the dots to a more affordable version.
One would think so anyway. So Toyota, if you're watching, please, RAV4 Prime would be fantastic.
Our free sales advice, bring it.
Yes. And if you do, we'll send an invoice. All right, let's dive into what surprised you this month. I'm going to take this one first.
Lead us away, please.
Because F-150 finally outsold Ram and Silverado. The fact they sold any was most impressive considering the issues that they have had in recent months. But 311 F-150s delivered, 232 Ram 1500s, and 211 Chevy Silverados. Now, I believe that 1500, it's just the 1500s, only the small one.
Small, yes. Good word, yeah.
The small one.
Yes, the littler one.
I mean, the numbers in large pickups are still impressive. There is still a lot of appetite for those things here.
Absolutely. I don't know that we're going to see the heights we saw during and coming out of COVID, where there was no travel, petrol and interest rates were cheap, and people just wanted to drive around Australia. But it's really clear that there is a really strong appetite for those vehicles in Australia. And as much as there's been a bit of noise around them recently and the fact that they don't fit in cities, which is not quite true because you can drive one around town, there's a heap of people that have been spending tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars turning Land Cruisers into 6x6s with GVM upgrades, power boosts for Hiluxes.
They do a extension, yeah.
The aftermarket tray market for cars like that is huge because maybe people want a longer bed. And ultimately, although they are converted to remanufactured in right-hand drive in Australia, they are a factory-backed option as opposed to having to take a Hilux or a Ranger and take it beyond what it was meant to do originally. So yes, there are some people who are posing in them, but there is a real need for a vehicle like that in Australia and demand for a vehicle like that in Australia, and I think more competition is only a good thing.
And I just want to say to any naysayers, you used to be able to order an AU Falcon in a 6-wheel configuration.
That's
it was like
right.
6.5 metres long, and nobody complained about them being too big. They were very cool.
They were very cool. Between that and the Falcon, was it the RTV?
Yes, the 4-wheel drive one.
Yeah, the 4-wheel drive one, and then the Holden Crewman, which I still see getting around today. The Aussie ute industry was well ahead of its time. It just didn't quite nail the body style that we've got now.
I mean, the problem, and we're getting off topic, but the problem with the Crewman is not even I could fit in the back seat.
Yes, and you are tiny.
4 foot nothing. So yes, that was an issue with the Crewman. So it was basically a space cab. All right, what surprised you this month, mate?
The surprise for me this month was looking at the sales numbers for the Tesla Model Y. Tesla has been dominant for a really long time, and I know in the intro you spoke about Tesla's sales slide. There is strong demand for electric vehicles in Australia. There is strong demand for hybrids and PHEVs, as we've said. Tesla's dominance is slipping, and I don't think it's supply-based because we keep seeing photos of Teslas parked up at the docks in Australia.
Yeah, I mean, Model Y didn't even crack the top 20,
No, so with
Model 3, yeah.
1,330 deliveries. It was still double the Lexus NX at 520, which was the next in its class. But if you look at the best-selling 3 medium SUVs under 60 grand, which are the ones that the Model Y kind of competes with when you take a top-end RAV and a bottom-end Model Y, 6,700 sales for the RAV, 2,200 for the Outlander, and 2,050 for the Sportage. Yes, Tesla's delivery structure is different to those brands. They tend to load at the back end of a quarter, which would be in September. Because that's the last month of the quarter. There's some ground to be made up for Tesla there, and I don't know that its position as the default electric car with the price cuts, with the market changing, is going to stand for much longer.
Well, if there's 6,000 Model Y deliveries this month, we're going to know exactly what happened.
Yeah,
there,
I'm going to be wrong again.
Yes.
What about for you?
Yeah, I mean, aside from the large pickups, I think the fact that 75 911s were sold, delivered, I love seeing that number. I mean, it is. One would think it's a niche car, but it is so cool. The other thing is, poor Citroen, I mean, you got to feel for them. 5 C5Xs delivered when Ferrari delivered 15 cars.
Yeah, Citroen we've talked about on the podcast. It's on the way out the door.
Very much, yeah.
If you are a bit of a weirdo who likes good cars, because they are good cars.
I'm not talking about James when he's not here, okay?
If you want a deal on a new car, I would walk into a Citroen dealership and just make a number up and see how they react, because those cars have been here for a very long time. They are a little bit weird, but they're still really good to drive and still really well equipped, and they need to get rid of them.
Yeah, it sort of feels like walking into a Blockbuster in the last couple of months of its existence. You're like, I'll just take these and not bring them back.
What do you want for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull? I'll give you $2.50.
All right, well, that pretty much wraps up VFACTS for this month. If you are looking for a deal on a brand new car...
If so, have you heard of Help Me Car Expert? All you need to do is go to Google, type in Help Me Car Expert, or scan the QR code on your screen. It will take you to the CarExpert website. It's not just me or Sean doing the video stuff. We're like a big company, 60 full-time employees, and on our website you're going to find news, reviews, and also our car chooser tool. If you're unsure which car you want, all you do is enter in all of your requirements. It'll spit out a stack of options. You can read the reviews, watch the videos, and then we can even put you in touch with one of our friendly dealers.
All right, it wouldn't be a CarExpert podcast without our picks of the week, so I don't have many options. I'm going to throw it to you, Scott.
Can I throw it to you as a bit of a change?
Sure.
What's your pick, Sean?
Well, it's car adjacent.
Okay.
It's actually, these guys, they mounted like an Insta360 camera on the back of their motorcycle on a racetrack, but it's not just a regular motorcycle, it is a Isle of Man TT spec.
Oh, wow.
So it has a side car.
Okay.
Hence car adjacent. Yeah. But it is just, it's mind-boggling watching these things. Like, it's one thing to watch them come past in Isle of Man. It's another thing to be on board and seeing, like, the guy that rides the bike has the easiest job in the world compared to his buddy on the side.
They're throwing their body around like crazy, aren't they?
But no, they're not tied to anything. Like, it is grip strength that's holding there, and they are off one side, off another. And this is just on a racetrack. Yeah. Like, where it could still go bad, but it's not quite as bad as going off into a sheep paddock in the Isle of Man. So, and that's also a great documentary is the Isle of Man documentary that's narrated by Jared Leto. Definitely check that out if you haven't. But Scott, what's your pick this week?
I've also gone Motorsports Madness. This is an onboard shot from, I'm actually not sure what sort of car it is, but it's down the main straight at the Nürburgring Nordschleife combined circuit. And it's in the fog, and he is absolutely flat out. Overtakes a slower, lower class car, and then at one point there's a rival right next to him on this narrow stretch of road, and no one lifts. They are just absolutely insane. Doing that for 24 hours in a team of 3, obviously, I don't know how you would ever be able to match the level of focus required or the depth of sleep you would have afterwards.
I feel like to be able to do that, you'd have to be so sleep deprived that you don't quite understand what you're doing. And that's why it works in the 24 hours.
Just running on pure adrenaline by the end of it.
The other thing about the Nürburgring 24 hours, it's never actually a 24-hour race because they're normally parked up for 8 or 10 hours waiting for fog to lift.
The overnight fog and then the reduced speed zones. It's chaos, but it's the best kind of motorsports chaos.
Absolutely. All right, well, that is going to bring us to the end of this week's podcast. Thank you, everyone, for coming along. Any final thoughts before we do wrap up?
I actually do, which is unusual for me. We have got through the garage this week a BMW 430i and a Mercedes-Benz CLE 200. They are similarly priced, similar size, similar theory. It is so interesting for everyone who says cars are all the same these days.
Mercedes cars are, as it turns out.
That's it. Sit in the 4 Series and sit in the CLE, and they are such different cars inside and to drive. I much prefer the BMW. It's really interesting how brands have now reached a point where they've taken the screens, steering wheel, turbo 2-litre 4-cylinder engine formula, and they're deviating again from what was a pretty standard formula at one point. It's a convenient timing for the booking, but it's been really interesting hopping between the two and seeing how BMW and Mercedes are both interpreting the same theory.
And that BMW looks fantastic.
It does.
Say what you will about the grille,
Yeah.
that's open to interpretation, but the rest of the car looks amazing.
Well, you took photos. Let's chuck one.
Yeah, we'll put the
so
photos
people
up side
can-
by side for you. All right, well, that brings us to the end this week. Hopefully next week we will have a full panel. We will see. No promises there. But thank you, everyone, for coming along. Thanks, Scott. Shout out to Paul. Thank you very much for joining. And we will see you all next time.